Talk Show. Recorded live.
Hello, and welcome to the Castle Dracula Horror Movie Podcast. On this podcast, we talk about horror movies, vampire movies, and all-around awesomeness. And this week, we continue our comedy horror retrospective with Shaun of the Dead. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans we have. So warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, author of the Alex Van Helsing series from HarperCollins. With me from Austin is Drew Edwards, writer of the long-running webcomic Halloween Man and a contributing writer to Rockabilly Online and Tales from the Grave from Monsterverse Comics. Say hello, Drew.
Hello.
And also in Denver, with color commentary, host of the mom-oriented podcast Pod Moms, attorney Julia Guzman. Say hello.
Hello. I'm happy to be dry and not in the flood-ravaged parts of Colorado, thankfully, but thinking of those folks.
Oh, my God, yes. No, we can't stop watching it. People keep calling us and saying, so are you flooded? And we're like, no, that's half an hour worth of...
Thankfully we're okay. Well, not even. I mean, Aurora is right around the corner, and they're pretty badly flooded. We just got lucky.
It's been terrible, generally
but,
terrible.
Yeah.
Okay, to the apocalypse. Shaun of the Dead is a 2004 British zombie comedy film directed by Edgar Wright, written by Edgar Wright and Simon Pegg, and starring Simon Pegg and Nick Frost. Pegg plays Shaun, a man attempting to get some kind of focus in his life as he deals with his girlfriend, his mother, and stepfather, and at the same time he has to cope with an apocalyptic uprising of zombies. This is our second zombie movie, and only the second zombie movie we've done in all the many, many, many episodes that we've done. The first ones were, what, Drew? What was the last one that we did?
Return of the Living Dead.
Return of the Living Dead.
I wish I could unsee that one. The part that I saw, I didn't even see the whole thing.
Okay, let me remind you. I've had people listen to this show, and they go, well, how come Julia storms out of Return of the Living Dead? Return of the Living Dead is the only episode we've done where a cast member literally says in the middle, and that was as much as I watched, and I'm not going to talk about this movie anymore. Bye.
Because it's horrible.
And
It's a horrible movie.
And leaves. It's because Julia was offended by the...
To quote Phoebe, my eyes.
Well, in Return of the Living Dead, they do some grody stuff. Like there's like some half dogs in the laboratory.
Well, the one,
that start,
which is enough.
Right. And there's some sad zombies and stuff, and so...
zombie abuse.
And Julia, we have you back for another zombie.
Yeah, this one's much better.
And Drew, I think this one's one of your favorites. I think this is the one that you specifically requested.
If we're gonna do comedy horror, like this is a must, I think.
It absolutely is, and I may well have forgotten to do it. So like next week is my specific request, which is way more obscure than this movie. But I think you've chosen.
And
well.
then mine's the following week. We're missing Tony today because he's hosting an event over at the Alamo Draft House.
That's right.
Good luck to Tony.
Tony Salvaggio is doing the super fun Monkey Bash. And
break a leg, Tony.
I think you missed Happy in there somewhere. Super fun Happy. I don't know.
It is like called the short of it is Monkey Bash.
Okay.
And that's what they call it. And I had to be reminded today. No, Tony's hosting the Monkey Bash, so that's why we are light. Mm-hmm. We are the three amigos. All right. So let's start with first impressions of Shaun of the Dead. Drew, what the heck are we watching?
Well, to me, this is, and I was saying this before we started recording, to me this is actually a very important film, pop culturally speaking, because what this is a mashup of a romantic comedy and a zombie splatter movie. And I think what the Brits did here is they actually made it okay for guys to like romantic comedies, and they made it okay for women to like zombie movies. So Walking Dead, you owe your ratings to these fine British gentlemen, in my opinion. Anyway, excellent movie, very funny. If you've not seen Hot Fuzz or Rolled In, you should go see those too. But this, not only one of the better comedy horror films ever made, but probably one of the better zombie movies, period, ever made.
Yep.
Okay. All right. That's high praise, and that's a good place to start. And you've apparently hung the entire culture of bro comedies of the past 10 years on the shoulders of Shaun of the Dead.
I will stand by my statement.
All right, then. All right, we'll discuss that. So I'm wondering if that means that The Hangover can be blamed on Shaun of the Dead. Is that, would there be, I don't know. That's it. Okay, all right. Good thought, and we'll get to that. Julia, what are your first impressions? First of all, have you seen Shaun of the Dead before?
Yeah,
and what are your first impressions?
Yeah, as you reminded me, we saw it with some friends like a whole bunch of years ago.
Yeah.
Yes. No, I enjoyed it then. I enjoy it now. It's really funny, and I just think it's such a clever way to approach a zombie movie where that you don't even, like, the zombie story is taking place in the background for most of the movie, like almost about half the movie, I think. And there's it's really, like you were saying, it's kind of just more of a romantic comedy. And then suddenly it's a zombie film, but the zombie film starts way before we actually participate in it,
yes.
which I think is fascinating. So I really enjoyed this film.
Okay, and my take on it, I am. This is not my favorite movie. I've nothing against it, and I found that watching it this time, I laughed a lot more. So I laughed out loud. There are a lot of jokes and genuine laughs in this movie, and it even has a kind of a sweetness that I really enjoyed. So the funny thing is, I didn't have much interest in coming back to watch it because I remembered not really liking it that much. I remember kind of feeling like it was uneven and that it was, a sort of British romantic comedy, like, Four Weddings and a Funeral or something like that. But there was also all this zombie gore.
Well, you just sort of described the point.
Right. Well, and I
and don't you like Four Weddings and a Funeral? It's an excellent film.
I love that movie.
Well, true love is all around us.
Movie.
And actually, yeah, actually, this movie starring Andie MacDowell. And,
but that's from Love Actually that you're quoting. No, Four Weddings and a Funeral is the,
No, Love is All Around Us was the theme to Four Weddings and a Funeral.
Really?
Yes, you are correct. That was it Love Actually or About a Boy?
Yeah, Love Actually has Christmas is all around us. Remember?
Yeah.
Love Actually also
which actually
has
comes back to Bill Nye. Yeah, that's what yeah,
that's right.
That's what I was about to say. Yeah, he plays the rock and roll star.
And it's funny. I think now I can appreciate this movie. Really has a heck of a lot of great performers in it. I mean, there's Bill Nye. There's the lady who plays the mom who's on Downton Abbey. There's this that's Penelope Wilton, who
Lady Crawley or whatever her name is. Count. What is she? That's just anyway.
And Simon Pegg has become, since this movie came out, a real phenomenon, and people love him. So,
he's Scotty.
But all that aside, and we'll get back to Simon Pegg. But all that aside, I was not really looking forward to it, and I was pleasantly surprised. It made me laugh and a lot, and I really liked it. So I have no idea why my memory of it had soured. Maybe it had soured because it's so darn popular, which is a terrible, terrible thing to say. Okay. So, and in fact,
Tony would be so upset with you for saying that.
I know. Well, it wasn't that I don't like things that are popular. I mean, clearly I like a lot of things that are popular, but I couldn't remember if I actually liked it or if it was just this thing that was on a lot of clever.
Well, but this wasn't like it was a pop culture phenomenon overnight. It got a limited release and became kind of a cult thing, and then got a bigger release because of that.
That's right. That's true. I mean, to some extent, yeah, this is the absolutely fabulous of zombie movies, and it's caught on. So, all right. But it's a zombie movie, so we should talk a little bit about where this film fits in. As we said, the basic gist of it, we'll get into the plot a little bit, but the basic gist is that there's this fella living in London, and our friend Simon Pegg is just a regular working-class schlub. He's a middle manager at an electronics store. He doesn't get any respect, and over the course of several days, a great zombie apocalypse starts to unfold. And so we should talk about what the influences of other films are on this. Drew, I mean, what are the first that would pop to your mind, Drew or Joy?
Well, I mean, there's obvious amount of love for the Romero, the original Night of the Living Dead trilogy.
Yeah.
I mean, they even use music from Dawn of the Dead repeatedly in the movie.
Dawn of the Dead?
Yeah,
This,
yeah.
I did not notice.
The beginning, that sort of like
No, that's right. That's really right. Although the funny thing is, the very beginning, they play. I have to point out, they play one of my favorite songs of all time. Opens the movie, and that is "Ghost Town" by the Specials, which is part of the '80s ska revival, and the kick-ass song. And so that suddenly just opened my eyes and said, "Oh, well, I love this movie now."
With some great credits, by the way, with the sort of the zombie, like the people walking to the street doing sort of a prelude to the zombie dance.
Yes.
Well, it's like they're zombies. It's like they're zombies already. They just don't know it.
Yeah.
Well, and that's one of the cool things that's going on is all of this business about how people who are tired and hungover and working too early in the morning are very much like The Walking Dead.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they are, because The Walking Dead basically are ambulatory, but only with the slightest spark of life. You know, and they're moved by various needs, and that's what the movie's saying. That's what we're like when we stayed up all night hanging out and drinking and doing whatever.
Yeah, that's certainly what Simon Pegg's like when he's walking through the streets after all the zombies have taken over, and he doesn't notice any of them, not a single thing. He doesn't notice anything as he walks through because he's just in his own little cloudy world.
Well, and we started out talking about this question was really about the influences, and there are relations to that in the Romero. I agree with Drew, by the way, that this movie not only takes Romero as its influence, but I think it almost takes exclusively Romero as its influence.
But yeah, you don't really see. I mean, there's one offhand joke that relates back to 28 Days Later at the very end of the movie, but the zombies themselves are basically straight out of the George Romero playbook.
That's
well,
right.
Apparently, I mean, according to the trivia, a lot of the inside jokes actually have to do with the show that Simon Pegg was on, Spaced. Yeah, so apparently, a lot of the zombie extras are fans of the show. Like they actually recruited them on a Spaced Out fan website, and they have.
Well, tell me about Spaced, because I do not even know this.
Spaced was a sitcom that Simon Pegg and Edgar Wright worked on, and the girl, the sort of female counterpart to SHAUN that they keep running across, it was the female lead on that, and it's an excellent show. I mean, if people, just how I was urging people to go check out Hot Fuzz and World's End. If you have not seen, if you're a fan of those movies and you haven't seen Spaced, I mean, Spaced is, all of these kind of sync up almost as a like if you watch them all together, they a meditation on Generation X and the way Generation X is aging, and they're very interesting to watch in order if you have the time, of course. Interesting.
Yeah, but apparently, like a lot of these people, like Jason, Nick Frost, who is Ed, he's on that show. Julia Deakin. It says,
Tenzin Grieg shows up in the background of this.
Right. Well, and then there's of course Lucy Davis and Martin Freeman, who are Don and Tim from the original Office.
Right. Which I did enjoy, although it's cringe-inducing. It's really hard. So what we've called out, this is yet another influence on this movie, which is, weirdly enough, modern urban British sitcoms.
Yeah.
Of which we only get we're in the United States. We get them sort of in a trickle. They show up on PBS or BBC America.
Well, we only get the ones that are popular enough that they think they're going to import them over here.
Right. Well, and isn't it funny? I mean, think about this. Even the most unpopular sitcom still gets millions of people watching it. Isn't that crazy? I mean, think about it. You can have a really great book come out by a genius writer, another, Franzen, whatever, and it still will not be read by nearly as many people as will watch a given episode of a given sitcom that lasts one season and goes away. That always amazes me, the fact that these are the things that are actually reaching people.
By the way,
you first, Julia. Sorry.
I was going to say the George Romero thing. apparently George Romero actually was so impressed with the movie that he asked them to be in Land of the Dead, which is the fourth part of the Dead series, in cameos as zombies.
Well, but, okay, so we're talking about Romero. Drew, sorry, you were going to say something.
Well, I was going to say I often something that keeps me up at night from working on my comic is thinking about how the worst episode, or the worst written issue of X-Men or Superman or whatever is still going to have way more readers than the best written issue of Halloween Man. So there you go.
You never know.
You never know.
Another chapter in your life. We don't know. You could be
well, I mean, gosh, when you think about that, it's like all the crap that's on TV that has millions of people watching it, and then there's all this amazing stuff that nobody sees.
The crowd is not always completely stupid, though. For instance, you and I have become addicted to Breaking Bad, and everybody else is as well.
Right, but there's also Honey Boo Boo, which has probably more viewers than Breaking Bad does.
And people,
Amish Mafia, I that's become my new love-hate thing, because everybody keeps telling me, because I wear suspenders, I look like a member of the Amish Mafia.
Oh, my gosh. the getting back to Romero, amazingly, for another thought, this notion of the fact that he's walking around in the morning, and other people are also walking around, and there are zombies happening in the background, that actually is played up in the very first scene of the very first zombie movie by Romero, because that happens to them. Remember, Johnny and Barbara, who are the first characters we meet in Night of the Living Dead, they go down to the graveyard, they're going to lay some flowers, they're bicker, and in the background, a zombie wanders around. But they don't know it's a zombie until he comes up and attacks them. And we don't know it's a zombie because it's 1968, and we don't know what zombies are. And so what's clever here is that the same trick is done, except for that now we're the audience, and we're going, when is he going to notice that there are zombies around? Because we're well versed in it. By the time we walk into this movie, we're way ahead of these characters. You know, we also have seen a lot of these movies, so we know that it's not liable to work out well for any of them. That's the next thing that I want to talk about is, Drew, you mentioned that this is a mashup of zombie apocalypse films and romantic comedies. And after we talk about zombie apocalypse, I want you to explain that one to me. But if this is a zombie apocalypse, that's a dark thing to do a comedy about. Because in my experience, every zombie apocalypse movie, they all fight really hard, they survive, and then everybody's dead by the end of the film. What are the tropes of the zombie apocalypse that you would call out?
Well, I think usually, it's definitely one that's heavy on display here. Is you have the trope of the siege, whereas people wall themselves into a place and they're surrounded, and they're either trying to fight their way out or keep things from getting in, or both.
It's like somebody hits a stopwatch in a sense, and they
exactly.
say, "Okay, the zombie holocaust has arrived. What do you do? What is the very next thing that you do?"
Go to Disney World.
Yeah, well, I think some people would choose that. It'd be funny if you could have a sort of choose-your-own adventure that played through. What do you do with the first 12 hours of a zombie apocalypse? I think. Yeah. Go ahead.
No. Sorry.
Well, I was just thinking. Greg Scott, who's an artist I work with, points out that he thinks these movies, their best part is always the first 20 minutes of the characters' lives. So literally, what it is that they do the very first moment that they realize that there's a map, that the dead are walking around in the street and attacking people. Do you stay holed up in your room? Do you go to the grocery store and get food? Do you go to the hardware store? Do you go to the gun store? Do you go get your friends, or do you abandon them? All that stuff.
I love that sequence when he. It reminded me of Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels when he, or what's the movie? The gypsy movie with
Snatch.
Right, yeah, Snatch. When he does he's predicting how he's going to play, how he's going to go pick up his mom, kill the stepfather, go pick up his mom. He's going to be all happy and cheerful. He's going to go pick up the girlfriend, and they're going to go to Winchester, have some drinks, the whole thing, and that whole sequence was so funny and clever, and it was not at all that's the thing. It's so many parts of this movie are classic zombie, and then so many are just completely not at all.
Well, and that's also the moment where you see this character played by Simon Pegg, and this is another thing that happens in a lot of these movies. This is a character who's never amounted to much. And when we meet him before he notices all the zombies, everybody's telling him what a loser he is and how, you know, he needs to sort his life out, he's got to get it together. His girlfriend breaks up with him. And so when the zombies start coming and he realizes that he can kill them by whacking them in the head with a mallet, or a cricket bat, I guess it is, he and his buddy Ed suddenly have the chance to be heroes. And you can kind of see that this is really appealing to him in a kind of a childish way. He imagines it going way too easily. But he figures, you know, he's going to leapfrog from being, just sort of a regular guy who doesn't have much to account for, all the way to being sort of an action hero. And then that's sort of what happens anyway. That's what's kind of cool, is that the movie
well, that is also in of itself kind of a trope of the zombie film, is that a lot of times regular people don't, you know, we're sort of repressed by society and being civilized, and suddenly if the brakes are now off, you actually can come into your own a little bit. Which
that's exactly right. Yeah, in fact, that's almost exclusively who turns out to be great in the zombie movies. You know, either that or that's basically who these movies tend to be about. But you're right. I liked how you said that. The brakes are off. That, you know, you're working in a terrible job. You know, at this electronics store down the street. People don't respect you. There's no leapfrogging. There's nothing you can do that will break you out of where you are. All the progress is going to be slow and full of risk and may never pay off. And now the zombie apocalypse comes along, and here's something that completely changed all the rules. You're right. That's something that we see over and over and over again. And I think actually that's one of the things that probably appeals to people about zombie apocalypse movies as much as all the monsters. You know, all the.
Well, it's that fantasy. It's that fantasy. It's almost like the fantasy that you're a cowboy or something. Yeah. You know, you're. You know, the fantasy of being a gangster, or it's suddenly, you don't have to answer to anybody, and you can become a better version of yourself.
Yeah, I really like how you said that. Julia has a phrase. I think Julia came up with it. I'm not sure, but we call it the catastrophic fantasy, where
you might have come up with it actually. I just embraced it and ran with it.
I have no idea, but the whole idea is you imagine some terrible thing in your life happening that the result of which would be a really interesting version of your own life.
Right, like my sister has played out, and then it turned out to be actually a movie. But she's always played out like she's the one who's supposed to get my kids if Jason and I meet our untimely demise. Right. So she's played that out, you know, like what that would be like. And then, of course, they made that movie with Kate Hudson, which was the same scenario.
That's right. This is a person who's lived with us, and yet one of her favorite fantasies is we both die in a fiery,
Yeah, well, it's not her favorite fantasy. It's like a terror.
But no, that's we call that the catastrophic fantasy.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know,
I think there's a lot of truth in that, and I think that is a big of not just zombies, but also if you look at like your classical post-apocalyptic films like Mad Max and things like that. There is that. You know, it's kind of an outlaw fantasy within those, although there is, there are lawlessness of it. And, that goes hand in hand with another trope, which is the fetishization of firearms, which I feel like they play on very nicely in this, is when they finally, it's England, so guns aren't quite as prevalent as they would be in the States. So it takes them a while to actually get their hands on a gun. But the thing that I love about it is that, the one thing I always can't stand in these movies is that suddenly normal people are making headshots left and right. And it would actually be really hard to make a headshot on a moving target. And here, they actually show how difficult it would be.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and I like that fetishization is totally true. It reminds me of the moment in Dagon, where the guy has to hotwire a car, because there's a car, he doesn't have the keys, and he's running from the monsters, and so he gets down to the car, but he's a regular guy, like you or me. And so he reaches under, and he's like, and he realizes...
He has no idea.
I have no idea how to hotwire a car. Like,
well, I will say...
Well, it just so happens, Jason, I do know how to hotwire a car.
Excellent.
Oh, well, that'll be a story for another time, how that happens. Yeah, Drew, you say that they're moving targets, though, but these are slow-moving zombies, so they're hardly really moving targets.
But they're still, okay, well, you're still going to be freaked out because there's a horde of zombies coming in. Like, it's not going to be as easy. It's not going to be as easy as they make it in most of these movies where people are just capping zombies like
unless
it's going out of
unless you have a machine gun like they have.
Or if you have a character who is, I don't want to give somebody who doesn't know how to shoot a gun a machine gun because they'll be spraying all over the place. But if you have, in American movies you'll have survivalist characters who are always shooting targets, so they're ready to do that kind of stuff. But if you look at like the 1989 remake of Night of the Living Dead that Tom Savini did, that one embraced that cliche entirely, where Barbara becomes a complete survivalist.
She's Ripley.
Yes, she does. She becomes Ripley. She goes from being a complete basket case to like putting a bandana around her head, and she's making headshots, and she's doing all this stuff. Whereas the action in the original Night of the Living Dead was a lot more like the way it plays out in this movie. Do you remember Ben in Night of the Living Dead, who's really our hero? He's the one who figures out that yes, you basically can just walk right past them, which leads me to another question: Okay, they deal with a lot of zombies. And there's a lot of business where they have to walk through. And in this movie, they walk through the zombies by pretending to be zombies. Okay, they walk stiffly, they make zombie sounds. But, and I know that's comedy, but what do zombies target? What's the deal with zombies? Do they target your smell? Do they target sound?
What wakes them up?
Yeah, what switches the zombie?
You didn't use the word triggers. What word did you use? You used the word. What was the word you used?
I think trigger is a good one.
But that's not what you said. You didn't say trigger. You said something else I thought was funny. Anyway, but yeah, what triggers a zombie to suddenly be alerted to your presence?
Well, I guess here it is signs of life, which the big one would be, are you acting like a human being?
Yeah.
In other movies, really I've always kind of...
Clearly they don't notice the eyes, because everybody, they have the regular eyes and they look at them in the eyes, but they don't notice.
Right. So I would have to imagine it must be lifelike movement,
or animated speech, yeah.
Yeah, something that doesn't sound like zombie ululation, and movement that doesn't seem like just the sort of swaying randomness that these zombies do.
In most movies, I always imagined that it was either smell or maybe they had something where they could somehow sense a pulse on something, but in this, I who knows?
It really, I think you nailed it. To the extent that there is a rule that you could follow in this movie, the zombies are keying on the fact that you are acting in an unpredictable, non-zombie-like manner, which makes them a lot like the creatures in Invasion of the Body Snatchers, where they recognized people by their individualism, if you started screaming or something, that's not something that a zombie or a spaced-out snatcher would do. That's something that an individualist does. It's amazing to me how many symbols there are in zombie movies, and how much of it has to do with, becoming cow-like, what it is to be human, your individualism, commercialism, how much we're reliant on nonsense. I think, it's really cool that they decide, you mentioned the siege mentality. So in this movie, the place they decide that they've got to go, their basic goal is going to be going to their favorite hangout, which is this pub called the Winchester, the one place that has a gun in the whole town.
A Winchester, no less.
Yes, it is a Winchester rifle. And so
he doesn't believe for a second that it actually works or is loaded.
No, he just wants to go because he's got it in his head that the pub will be a good place to be, and that it will be a strong place to be.
Well, it has big, heavy locks. They keep saying it has big, heavy locks.
Right.
It was pretty accurate, except for the fact that, it has windows. And
it has enormous breakable windows, yes.
Yeah.
And in fact, to be honest, if we're to be smart about it, they go there when they're gathering the team. He first goes to his girlfriend's apartment, which is in this giant apartment building, which is high off the ground. His argument for getting out of that apartment building is not one that I found particularly movable. He goes,
"No, you're right.
You're in danger here because when they notice you're here, they're going to keep coming." I suppose that's true enough, but that's...
You're right. They were probably safer in that place than they were at the...
Well, most of the bad things that happen to them because of human error. And I often say that, the way people act in this movie are probably more true to life than they are in straight horror films,
Absolutely.
where it's a little bit more dramatic.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because how do they end up getting it? One guy gets it because he's flipping out, as we could expect people to flip out, and it gets him too close to the windows, and he gets nabbed.
And then Ed gets bored, and he turns on the video game, and that makes much noise. And...
Right. They're exactly what Drew said. Human error. They are all slave to their lack of discipline. But it's a lack of discipline that is completely human.
Well, yeah, and then the mom is just too nice, so she gets bitten by the pajama zombie guy.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
There's another trope there. Actually, I have to say, when they're holed up in the bar, and their roommate. Remember, the roommate arrives when things are busting up and the glass is breaking open.
Yeah, the naked roommate.
The naked roommate comes in, and that moment is exactly like the return of Johnny in Night of the Living Dead, because it makes no sense that he would have found his way all the way to the Winchester pub, but he does. And that's exactly what happens with Johnny in Night of the Living Dead towards the end during the siege, because these movies always have a siege. Johnny shows up. But it's Johnny in that movie, it's Johnny that drags Barbara to her death. Not in the remake where Barbara becomes Ripley, but in the 68 version.
How much do you love the ending with the Ed? That was so great. I just love that Ed turned out to be the pet zombie.
Before we get to the ending, because I totally want to talk about that, but Drew, okay, go back to your theory because you mentioned it at the top, and so I'd love to hear. You explained how this is also a mashup of zombies and romantic comedies, and I don't understand that at all.
The first half of the movie very much follows the setup of a romantic comedy.
Exactly. Yeah.
See, backing me
I'm
up.
totally with it. No, that's what I'm saying is the first half of the movie, you're in the romantic comedy, and the zombie movie is totally playing out in the background.
So the romantic comedy you're talking about, it's about a guy who needs to get his life sorted out.
Yeah, because he gets dumped by the girl, and it's all about getting the girl back.
It could have been a female character. That could have been Cameron Diaz or Drew Barrymore or any number of women who starred in those kind of movies. But it's following that kind of plot line.
Yeah.
I guess that's totally true. Okay. All right. I will totally buy that.
Actually, if you were to put it into your little formula that we always, Jason has read books that reveal the secret formula of these movies, like any kind of this 3-act movies, and it would perfectly fit, except that it would be split into 2 movies. Like you'd have the formula for the romantic comedy until the point when suddenly the conflict becomes the zombie movie, which completely takes over but the romantic comedy does kind of wind up at the end because they do end up together.
Yeah. So it does. It still follows through on it. That's the great thing about this movie.
No, it does. You're absolutely right. It continues. It continues the story, but it follows. You're talking about the Save the Cat beat sheet, and it follows that pretty well. The break into Act 2, which is where the hero definitively leaves his old world and enters a new world.
It's like a zombie world.
It actually, it usually happens at exactly 25 minutes in.
Yeah.
And that break is the point where they put a plan together. And in this case, it's the plan, I'm going to go get my mom and get my girlfriend and to kill my annoying stepfather.
Although that ends up not working out the way he wants. That's the other thing I love is that he has this plan, but then the plan gets a little thrown off because the stepfather hasn't completely turned into a zombie yet, and that he forgot that the ex-girlfriend has those, people that she's always with. So
yeah, because plans never work the way that
right.
That's the way it works.
Well, the great thing about the stepfather character too is he's not as insufferable as SHAUN thinks he is. Like a lot of your opinion of him comes from SHAUN, but he's actually, and it's great. Credit to the screenwriting and credit to Bill Nye. He's a lot more multi-dimensional than you're first introduced to him. You initially see.
Absolutely, yeah, and all of this, and we also get to watch SHAUN not necessarily mature, but that his better self comes out as he goes along. He can't abandon these people who live with his girlfriend. He can't abandon his father-in-law. He genuinely feels sad about his father-in-law when his father-in-law dies.
You mean his stepfather?
I'm sorry. Yes, his stepfather. And, the better version of SHAUN that's in there, and it never gets to come out because, as Drew was talking about, it gets trapped inside because you're living this prosaic, beaten-down life. The apocalypse brings out the better version of you. What a wonderful, wonderful reason for these movies to exist, to picture the better version.
Well, I love the evolution of the Ed character, even though he doesn't have all that much, but.
Okay, so let's talk about him.
By the way, did you know that their relationship is based on the real life relationship of those two actors? They actually lived together in an apartment for a while.
You're kidding.
Well, I keep, I made a crack on Facebook about how if they ever did a remake of Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, they could do it with Harold and Kumar, but it'd actually be better with these guys.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, these guys would be fantastic. You're absolutely right, because Ed is a modern version of Lou Costello. He's completely driven by his passions, by his bodily passions. He has no desire whatsoever to sort of conform to the mature world that everybody else wants him to. He wants to play video games. He wants to get away with whatever he can get away with. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter to him if he has any more money than what it takes to buy video games and buy beer. And
that to me is where, again, all of these different interlinked projects that we've talked about, it's also kind of, again, that's a meditation on what it's like to be a member of Generation X and about how we, as more so than I think a lot of generations, really hold on to our childhood. Although the millennials may give us a run for our money.
I couldn't say. They seem more serious than us. I have no idea. I don't know.
I just spent some time with a bunch of them for a while, and I don't know if I agree with that. But maybe I'm just a particularly grumpy person under the right circumstances.
It's now you're talking about the notion of being a Generation X person who's aging, and yeah, that's exactly what's going on there with the girlfriend, because she's saying, it's been 3 years, and so he's now just 29, okay, so he's about to turn 30, and she's saying we need to move our life forward. The world that you're in right now of hanging out all day, playing games, going out drinking beer, sounds great and seems wonderful, and yet it can't go on forever. And watching it, I have to ask, well, why can't it go on forever? And the answer is, it can't go on forever with this girlfriend. She is not going to stick around for it to go on forever.
Well, yeah, if you want to be Ed and just be a bachelor, then sure. Right. But SHAUN wants more than that, and it's kind of Ed that is, unfortunately, he uses as an excuse for not growing up, when really Ed's not really the one at fault. Ed's never really, be like me, SHAUN. I guess he does it to a degree, but it's usually only to comfort SHAUN when SHAUN's screwed up.
Right. Yeah. I mean, SHAUN, think about this. You said earlier, compare SHAUN and Ed to Abbott and Costello. So it's easy to see how Ed is Costello, driven by just the fun, and he gets scared, and he's very simple, and that's great. Abbott, though, remember, Abbott was
Abbott's more like the other roommate.
Yeah,
yes.
Abbott was a fuss budget. And it's interesting that now Shaun will push Ed around, but not much.
No.
Shaun never gives Ed a speech until
or an ultimatum or anything.
Until the movie's nearly over.
Yeah, he gives him the speech when they're facing the zombie,
right.
when all the zombies are watching. But then he feels bad about it and he apologizes.
Well, yeah, and his speech,
Shaun's pretty, I think, nebbish at heart.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he doesn't want to confront people. He can't really confront the kid that works for him at the store.
Can I say that kid was perfectly cast because you just want to slap him?
Yes. you absolutely do. You're like, oh my God, get this kid eaten by a zombie, but quick. So yes. All right. I also enjoyed the fact that we put together the team. If you wanted to write a zombie apocalypse, you could probably create a little chart and fill it up with people that are almost identical to the team that comes together in this one, and also comes together in the remake of Dawn of the Dead and every other one of these. And in fact, they run into a whole other team of people identical to their own.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's all those people that are in the shows that they're in.
Yes.
That's the people that are from Spaced and The Office and all that. Yeah.
Yes. And the wonderful Tamsin Greig has no words at all. She's there with a cute hat, but she's wonderful in episodes. So good on her. All right. We should talk about. Let's see. We talked about Simon Pegg. Actually, we should talk a little bit about Simon Pegg, and then about the ending, and then I want to get to final thoughts and endorsements. But really quick, just to talk about what's become of Simon Pegg. I'm amazed at how his career has come along, because you would not expect, having watched this movie and then having watched Hot Fuzz, that this was the next Scotty. And so now this guy's in the stratosphere. I mean, he's showing up on the Daily Show, and is doing a funny Scottish accent in the Star Trek movie and stuff like that. I mean, I'm really impressed that this, because this, let's face it, this is kind of this movie is a cult movie. It's something that people like you and me would have watched. It's something that hipsters would have on like a bumper sticker and stuff like that. But you don't go in the grocery store and I don't know. I'm trying to find an example of what it is to be.
It's not an impulse buy in the checkout aisle, except during Halloween.
That's exactly right. That's exactly precisely right. And so Simon Pegg has really taken off, and I'm really impressed. And he has that new movie, which I haven't seen, World's End. So
World's End, which is great.
You were explaining how this is actually kind of a trilogy.
It's not a trilogy in the way you think of like Star Wars, where there's a continuing story. It's more continuing themes, and they all star Simon Pegg and Nick Frost. And there's this movie, which is the horror film. There's Hot Fuzz, which is the cop movie, and the most recent one, which is still in theaters, which is World's End, which is kind of their take on Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Right, which, remember, Jason, that showed you the trailer for that, but we didn't. I said that we might consider doing it for the podcast.
It's not a bad idea.
Yeah, they call it, apparently they call it the Blood and Ice Cream trilogy.
Yes. And I would love to do World's End at some point. But Hot Fuzz is probably my favorite, strangely enough, and it does not have enough horror in it to really qualify to be on this podcast. But I will fully endorse Hot Fuzz. We can
stretch the definition of this podcast as far as it will go.
That's stretching it to too much of a limit, I would say. But
I was just thinking, though, the fact that they are all in it, but they play different characters, that sounds to me from what you're telling me as though it's very similar to the sitcom they were on, where you know, I mean, did they played like single characters, but also other characters on that show, correct?
Well, the sitcom was not. The sitcom had an overarching story. Like there was characters that were in every single episode. It was about this apartment complex and the people that they were in. And there was the SHAUN Pegg character, and I forget her name, but the actress that shows up in this as well. They were pretending to be a couple because they had this. You had to be a married couple to move into this apartment for some reason, and they pretend to be married so they can move in, and then of course through the course of the series they actually end up actually falling in love. But
no,
of course, yeah. But
no,
the comedy is more from following their lives and where they're at in their lives and their struggles as they try to grow up a little bit.
That sounds, in a word, totally cute. I have no doubt that is an adorable.
Spaced is excellent. It's a great sitcom, and I can't say enough nice things about it.
The fact that they present themselves, that they're together, but they present themselves as not a couple and so forth. That sounds like it would go well with.
And I have to say, normally I hate sitcoms.
Really?
Yeah, I find them to be very stressful. Like I like movie comedies. Sitcoms is usually people doing idiotic things for no reason other than being idiotic, and I find that stressful rather than funny. For some reason, in a movie format where it's more stretched out, it doesn't bother me. But like that little 20-minute increment that you get on a sitcom, I just can't do it.
Yeah, it's so artificial most of the time. That's why I really like The Office, because The Office it felt really real. Like it just felt like like a real documentary. But most sitcoms, it just feels so artificial. It just doesn't. I can't participate in the.
Well, it's sort of burlesque. There are certain sitcoms that I actually go back to that I really enjoy.
Well, there's a few. Like
Friends.
I
love
Friends.
Is hilarious.
Yeah, I love Friends.
I still think Family Ties is hilarious. So there are certain ones, and probably, but that has a lot to do with my age. I think that if you were a child of the '90s, there would probably be one or two that we would just despise that people love. And some sitcoms are truly comfort food. You could turn it on and just sort of
the worst offender in my opinion is Frasier. Frasier just stresses me out.
Holy mackerel. That's funny because Frasier was very well received.
The show or the character?
Both.
Well, I didn't like the character, but I loved the character of Niles. I thought he was so funny, and I liked the dad and the dog. So I liked everybody else, the supporting cast of that show, and so therefore I watched it despite.
And now
I didn't mind Cheers. I was actually a big fan of Cheers, I have to say.
This is excellent. Well, I was going to say that we're now, our lives are not our own, or our house is occupied by small females. So we watch a lot of Disney sitcoms, So I'm talking about Good Luck Charlie and stuff like that. So, and it's funny. Those are actually pretty funny. They grow on you after a while. It's sort of sad. You wander through. You get to know the characters. It becomes like another family on the other side of the glass over there. But, I just described my life. I made it sound very sad.
Almost like you're turning into a zombie.
Exactly. Precisely, yes. Well, isn't that one of the things that the guy says in the remake of Dawn of the Dead? What were you before? And he goes, I was a good dad. That's the vision. He's the stand-in for everybody. He's like, I would make it in the case of an apocalypse, even if I was nothing.
I don't know that I would. Maybe I would. I have certain skills. I was a butcher for many years. Maybe that would help. I don't know.
It's gonna do better than anything that I can do. I mean, I literally, what can I do for you? Write you an angry
I know how to shoot a gun because I grew up in the country, but I can't say I'm an amazing shot. I don't know about making headshots.
Yeah, I wouldn't stand by it either. I'm sure I might stand by you, but I don't know. Julia was an excellent shot, so there we go.
Well, there we go. I went Julia on my zombie.
I like
apocalypse
target
game.
shooting. It's fun.
Okay.
You're on my team, not Jason.
Yes.
The problem is, I would have a really but I guess there's zombies, so I guess I could get past that. I was going to say I would have really hard time shooting anybody.
And stuff. See, you need to just trade places and go
zombies.
to somewhere where you don't recognize anybody. You know?
No, I know. Like when he has to shoot his mom. I didn't think he should. I didn't understand why he.
I have a zombie pact with Jamie, so she knows that if I become one of the undead, that it's okay.
All right. Yeah. You give her permission.
Well, it's also like our Hugh Jackman pact. So, but I won't go into that.
I'm with you. Not about Hugh Jackman, but
well, we both know that you think Hugh Jackman is dreamy, Jason.
It's all about Les Miserables. Okay, I want to talk about the ending of this movie, and then then final thoughts. So the ending, first of all, the ending is suddenly comic. We wrap up the ending and we go forward a period of time, and it's everybody's remembering Z-Day, and they do this clever stuff where they're showing people reminiscing about being, on the air reporting on at the time of when the zombie apocalypse happens. But basically, what happens is that Great Britain has the zombie apocalypse under control.
Well, the thing that I love about this is they basically enslaved the zombies and more or less made them more like what zombies are like in actual zombie folklore, which is slaves.
Yes. Wow, what a great observation. No, that's absolutely right. You'd have, like in I Walked with a Zombie, you have these near corpses who are just wandering around doing manual labor for you. And people are keeping them in your house. They show a woman on a talk show whose husband is a zombie and she still keeps him, And that's
the whole segment was really, really funny. The whole montage was really funny where they're like, and you sleep with him? And I was like, she can't sleep with him because then he would turn her into a zombie. So clearly she does. I actually found myself pursuing the line, like wondering what the rest of the interview was like.
How did that work out? I have to admit, this whole thing came dangerously close to leaving a bad taste in my mouth. This is the darkest part of the whole movie.
Well, and then the thing is, then as a lawyer, of course, I started thinking, boy, this would be a really rich area of law as far as, what are their legal rights, because they're not really people anymore. It's like go off into the whole analysis of, what are they?
They are using them as slave labor.
Yes.
Yeah, but they're not humans. So is it like they're dead?
What are the rights of the living dead?
Exactly. So that's what I was thinking. I'm like, this is going to be a whole other body of law.
The thing that is interesting is, even though the world does not, society does not collapse like the way it does in your typical zombie movie, it's still changed.
It's changed
because you have this subclass of subhumans.
Right.
Yes. And you also have to wonder, so they got the zombie population under control. Mm-hmm. What are they doing to prevent a new zombie population? I mean, they would have to put protocols in place where, let's say, we're at dinner, you choke on a grape and die. We've got to have protocols in place now for me to prevent you from becoming a zombie. And it probably becomes
have they found in, because they may have found an antidote to, not an antidote, not a story, an antidote to them turning into zombies. Obviously they can't bring.
Vaccine. Yeah.
Yeah, vaccine, right.
Maybe.
Right, but my point is that they clearly don't have a way of bringing back the dead to regular life. That's not going to work. But anybody who dies after this point, they could have a vaccine or an antidote or something.
I don't know. We don't know. We literally don't know. I mean, I could picture
Have you ever seen Fido?
No, what's that?
Fido is another zombie comedy, which is the logical extension of the society that we see here.
Huh.
Which we should do eventually. We should get around to doing that. I think you would dig Fido.
All right. Okay. So you can give us a hint, though. How do they grapple with the fact that you're going to dinner with somebody, they choke and die?
If I remember correctly, basically everybody keeps a gun on close hand, and if you die, you shoot them in the head.
Here's what I think. I agree that would happen for a few years, but I think eventually we are very, very good at sort of putting a shell around everything. I think it's possible that we would find ways to do all this stuff and create euphemisms for it and even make it almost bloodless. I think people would probably carry around something like an air rifle thing, and just go thunk, and if somebody were dead. I have a feeling that you would quickly develop these protocols that would make us all just pretend that there wasn't anything bizarre going on. Because I think that's in our nature, to take horrible things and normalize them. And actually, now I've said the darkest thing that can be brought on by this. But seriously, this is a really dark ending to me. They've enslaved the zombies. That just it makes me feel bad. It feels like if we do that, the worst of us will come out. People will start doing sick things with the zombies. They'll start torturing them, and it'll bring out the worst.
Or it's funny. I'm usually not the one to put the rose-colored glasses on a negative situation. Or you have what Sean is doing, which is he's continuing on having his best friend around, and Ed's life really hasn't changed much.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you for saying that. Yes, you're right. Ed, oddly enough, has not suffered much by becoming a zombie. He has just enough mental faculty to continue to enjoy playing.
What do they feed him, though? What do they feed the zombies? Because are they just feeding him raw meat or something? Like, what are they giving them to eat?
It is unclear.
At one
Scooby
point,
snack.
he actually tells Ed that he should just live in a shed, and then he does.
Yes, you're right. Okay, so we need to wrap it up. Let's talk about our final thoughts about Shaun of the Dead. How much we miss Tony Salvaggio, who would have brought a lot to this, and how much we probably miss Adam, who probably would have brought a lot to this if we had thought.
I think Adam would have called this a picture. I think this was a rated picture. I don't think it would have been a movie. I could be wrong.
Excellent. Yes. But it's just the three of us, and I think we acquitted ourselves like three people faced with a task. All right.
We should have done it all in fake British accents.
Final thoughts. Drew, we're going to go back to you, and then I want to come around for endorsements because I have a good one. Drew, final thoughts, Shaun of the Dead.
In a British accent.
No.
In a British accent, you say? No, I'm not gonna do that. Even though I suggested I'm a hypocrite. I think this is an excellent movie. Do not do what Jason did and get put off by the fact that it's popular. It's popular for a reason, which is that it's very funny. It's very oddly touching at times. And, I think, again, kind of like last week, this is a good movie to watch going into the Halloween season. There's nothing particularly Halloween-ish about it, except that it's got that weird mixture of warmth and despair. And take from that statement what you will.
Very, very good. Julia, your final thoughts on Shaun of the Dead?
Well, I think I've already said everything. It's just that I do like this whole marriage between, it's kind of a triple thing. It's romantic comedy, zombie film, and British comedy. Just however British comedy is different from American comedy, which I think is quite different. So I just really thought it was clever and interesting.
So, and my final thought is, I absolutely am glad that I embraced this movie. I had taken years to get around to watching it again, but it turned out it was funny and sweet and full of extremely clever writing, and so I do totally recommend this. And I have nothing else to add because we've definitely discussed a lot of things. Drew, do you have any endorsements for us?
Well, I've already endorsed it a gazillion times during this episode, but I'll endorse World's End yet again. It's still in theaters. It's the closing chapter of the Blood and Ice Cream trilogy, and I say that it's my least favorite of the three only because it is all three are amazing films. You should. It's still really, really good. You should totally see it. Also, Simon Pegg, DC, Warner Brothers, pay attention. World's End is his audition tape to play John Constantine. And I know that sounds ludicrous, but I'm telling you, put a piece on him, a blonde hair piece on him, let him play John Constantine. Movie magic.
It's a great idea. It's actually a really, really lovely idea. Julia, did you have any endorsements?
Well, we watched a really interesting little picture called, it is a picture, called The Way, which is stars Martin Sheen and is directed by his son Emilio Estevez. And it was such a neat little film. I just loved it. It takes place in it's a pilgrimage through Spain on the Camino de Santiago, and it's just the coolest film. I just loved it. So if anybody wants a neat little independent film to watch, starring Martin Sheen, check out The Way.
That was actually very lovely. It was an artsy weekend because I have two quick endorsements. One for the whole country. We watched Paris Je T'aime, which came out several years ago, but it's a collection of a whole bunch of little vignettes taking place all around Paris, and one of them is a vampire story. So I can slide this in to our show pretty readily, and it is so wonderful. There are bits that are directed. Every segment has a different director. So Gerard Depardieu directs one, Wes Craven. It's just fantastic. I mean, and Ben Gazzara shows up in one of his final performances. So Paris Je T'aime, fantastic. You can catch it on VOD. And here in Denver, I've discovered this video store called Video One, which has come in handy, has saved my bacon a couple times for this show, because physical video stores are far and few between, and Video One on Capitol Hill in Denver, they had Love at First Bite, and I got that, and they had Shaun of the Dead, and I got that, because Shaun of the Dead, is difficult to find, online, and they just have everything. They have lots of out-of-print stuff. That was the issue with Love at First Bite. So I was really impressed. It reminds me a lot of, great places like Vulcan Video in Austin. So I really, really recommend these guys, and it's been cool to find something like that. So that's it for me. I really appreciate everybody being out, and we are back. We are soon. We have a couple more movies in our comedy horror retrospective, and then we're going to enter the universe of The Werewolf, and that is going to be a fun, awesome retrospective full of some surprising choices. And so if you're digging what we're doing, leave comments on Facebook. Join the arguments that we're having right now about what movies we need to do in the future. We do listen to your recommendations. Like us on Facebook, like us on iTunes, leave a review, send links to your friends, any of those things and all of them. And we will totally see you next week. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Good night.
Good night.
Night.